Good morning, everyone. I would like to call to order the Audit and Finance Standing Committee meeting for June 19th, 2024. It is 10 a.m. My name is Paul Russell, and I represent Lower Sackville. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of April 17th, 2024. Can I please have someone moved by Councillor Hensby, seconded by Councillor Cleary? Any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. All in favor of the minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, thank you. Next item is the approval of order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chair, I know you'll want to agree with me on this, but I just think that since we received word yesterday that Halifax has been awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the second consecutive year, that we should take advantage of having our CFO here and some other finance people. And I know you've already sent your congratulations as Chair of Audit and Finance, but as Mayor, I'm very proud of that. And I want to thank you, Jerry, to you and all your team, and I hope you tell them that we're very proud of the work that they've done.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, with the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions, do we have any changes over to the clerk?
No additions or deletions have been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Councillor Daigle-Gammon moves the order of business as presented. Do we have a seconder? Mr. Mayor, thank you. Any changes from the committee? Not seeing any. All in favor of the order of business, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, thank you. Business arising out of the minutes is none. Declaration of conflict of interest, surprisingly, is none. Motions of reconsideration is none. Motions of rescission is none. Consideration of deferred business and notices of tabled matters are all none. Correspondence. Do we have any correspondence today?
No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office.
Okay, and do we have any petitions?
No petitions either have been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you, and I don't see any members of the committee with petitions, and there are no presentations today. The next item on the agenda is public participation, and this is the opportunity for members of public to come forward and address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. As of 4:30 yesterday, there were no individuals who had signed up, so I'm going to ask if any members members of the public in the gallery would like to step forward and address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. Would anyone in the gallery like to step forward and address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee? And third and final time, would anyone like to step forward and address the committee? Great, thank you very much. Moving forward, information items brought forward is none. The next item on the agenda is 13.1.1, the follow-up review of outstanding recommendations from 2019 and 2020 audits. And for this, we have our Auditor General, Andrew Atherton.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today to talk to you about our second follow-up reviews of two audits. LED streetlight conversion project audit from November of 2019 and our fleet vehicle use, car allowances, and mileage audit from March of 2020. We did our first follow-up on both of these audits in 2022, at which time 2 recommendations remained outstanding in each. Taking a look at the results this time, you can see a bit of a mixed bag. Both of our recommendations related to streetlight conversion audit have now been addressed. On the other side, both fleet recommendations continue to be incomplete. While I would always like to see all recommendations completed, I will note that the 2 outstanding recommendations from our fleet audit appear to be close to completion, and I hope to see them finished in the not-too-distant future. I'll move into the details now and touch quickly on our 2 recommendations from the LED streetlight conversion project audit. Both of these recommendations related to proper management and documentation of major capital projects, with an emphasis on managing project risks. I'm happy to note that a new capital project manager's financial handbook is now in use and helping to guide key steps during these projects. We also noted the new template in place to use in developing risk registers on larger projects. We reviewed those risk registers for a number of large projects, and while we did not audit them fully, I'm happy to say that they certainly exist and they appear very reasonable. Switching my focus to the outstanding recommendations from our fleet, vehicle use, car allowances, and mileage audit, we found no change from our 2022 follow-up status. At that time, we found 6 of the 8 original recommendations were complete, and nothing has changed since then. Now, despite that overall assessment, there have in fact been some actions taken towards implementation, but a couple of key steps remain. The first recommendation covers the completion of a fleet rationalization project, including details around a fleet use policy, monitoring of vehicle use, and developing a process to clarify disagreements. We noted the new policy around fleet use is in place, and a committee is ready to review vehicle use against standards, but at this time, the vehicle use standards or targets have yet to be approved. And without targets to monitor against, the committee has yet to meet and the recommendations remain incomplete. The other outstanding recommendation also covers the need to monitor utilization and check for inappropriate use. This recommendation needs the same thing. We need the targets or standards to be approved and monitoring against them to occur before we can consider it complete. So where do we go from here? Typically, my office follows up audits after approximately 18 months and checks back in on any remaining recommendations in another 18 months. We do not have a standard approach for dealing with recommendations still outstanding at that point. So given that much of the work required to complete the 2 outstanding fleet recommendations appears to be done, I've decided the most efficient approach is to ask management to reach out to my office when they are complete. So just to be clear, when the vehicle use targets or standards are approved and monitoring has occurred against them, I'm going to ask management to reach back out to us, at which point we will complete a 3rd round of follow-up, and I will come back here and tell you folks how that went. So that's it for follow-up, but before I wrap up, I'll touch briefly on what you can expect from me in the coming months. First up will be 2 audit reports that I intend to present in July, looking at business continuity planning and enterprise risk management. Both of these are in their final stages, and my team's working hard with management to finalize them. I look forward to discussing them with you next month. Our next follow-up work will be conducted in the fall with our first look at 2 audits, our work around corporate real estate and our work on the SCADA system at Halifax Water. Those are likely going to be ready for presentation sometime after your next election, so hopefully I'll see most of you here again. That is all I have for you today. At that point, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Andrew. We do have a few questions. Go ahead, Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for this report. Very much appreciated. I just have a couple of questions about the HRM vehicles. From what I understand, these vehicles have GPS trackers, is that correct?
I believe that has been installed on them.
Okay, is there a reason it's taking so long for the supervisors to track that? I know you probably can't answer that. But from what I understand, the supervisors normally give a verbal warning if something is out of the standard GPS and they track it and something's not in line. So they give a verbal warning, a written warning, and then there's a suspension. So from what you know, has that, I guess, how could I put this? Is that process being followed as part of, I don't know if that's part of your audit or not.
The challenge with our follow-up work is that it's very narrow. We're simply looking at the recommendations that we made, or in this case, the recommendations that were still outstanding. So anything that isn't specific to those recommendations, I can't speak to. But I think what you're referring to sounds like it's more of a focus of management on inappropriate use, and part of the monitoring that we're talking about is assessing whether the vehicles are even appropriate for a business unit to have. So how much should they be used? In our original audit, there was, I don't have the numbers at hand, but quite significant number of vehicles where it would have been more economically viable to pay mileage for a personal use vehicle instead of having a fleet vehicle. And that's where the standards and targets will come into play of how much should a vehicle be used to justify having a fleet vehicle.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, how many recommendations were there originally in the LED streetlight conversion?
There were only the two. So
two.
neither of those were complete in 2022, and they are now both complete.
Okay. And there was 8 in the fleet audit initially, 6 of which
Yes.
were complete, and 2 of which incomplete. Still incomplete, but you expect to hear shortly from management that work is being done. I don't know if Jerry or anybody has a sense of when that comes back?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kathy couldn't be here today, but she did mention to speak to these. But yeah, we're confident these will be done fairly soon. And I know John McPherson is here if he would like to say anything on those. But my understanding is they're pretty close to being finished.
Okay, that's fine. So my question is not related to these two specifically, Andrew, but when we went through the hiring process, we had a general conversation about auditors general. I'm trying to remember, do you know, have there been circumstances where an auditor's come forward to HRM where administration has said they simply don't agree?
To my knowledge, I don't believe that has happened. Well, let me clarify that. I don't believe that has been the final position. Through the clearing process, we'll regularly have discussions where management may not agree exactly with the wording that we've suggested.
Right.
We work through it with them to come up with, to get to wording that will get the outcome that we're looking for, that management is comfortable with.
Yeah, that's generally how I recall it too. And we have had some audits that have had dozens of recommendations, literally dozens, I think. Maybe some that had more than 50 recommendations. And it certainly makes more sense to me to have specific recommendations around important things. But just for those who are watching, so the role of the Auditor General, you make these recommendations. They're called recommendations, not called mandates. They're not called directives. They're recommendations. But by and large, everything that I recall that's come from an Auditor General, yourself and previous Auditor Generals, management have said, okay, we may have some issue with that, but we accept that and we will work to rectify that. Is that the way it normally works with provincial governments, for example?
I could only speak to my own experience, but yes, that's generally the way it works. You referenced the hiring process, and you'll recall that for me, a very important part of this is relationship management and building those relationships with management. At the end of the day, my goal as Auditor General is to see improvement, to shine a light on what's happening with HRM that could be showing what's being done really well, and to identify areas where we can have some improvement. By and large, that means that there's not a lot of value in me pointing out a recommendation that management tells me we can never do that, we'll never do that, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to change there. There may be situations where I need to do that, where I feel it's important for all of you to hear my perspective and to simply agree to disagree. But more often than not, my experience both provincially and what I intend to have here is to find a way that we can get the improvements that we're looking for and that management can agree to them.
Yeah, I think that to me makes a lot of sense. And it also, of course, means that when they come here as recommendations, it is incumbent upon us as a city to follow them or explain why we're not going to follow them, not to let them hang. So that's why these follow-ups, I think, are important, and I'm comfortable with where we are, and that these will be coming back in short order. And the next time you sit before us on the fleet one will be that we have wrapped up those recommendations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two things. Councillor Stoddard asked one of the questions about vehicle trackers or automatic vehicle location devices. I was wondering how that's being brought into the audit in regards to tracking the movement of vehicles versus, where appropriate or inappropriate, I guess you could say. I don't know how that's going to be monitored. And the other question was the LEDs. Streetlight transfer. I still had an issue about the gray lights. I don't know if you call them gray lights or ghost lights. There's three lists. The ones the municipality accepted, the ones that Nova Scotia Power have power accounts attributed to for private use, and there's a third list of lights that were undetermined whose ownership it is, and they're still out there. A number of these lights are still on municipal properties, but we haven't accepted them. Some of the lights are still undetermined why they're there. So I'm just kind of curious, have we ever had a chance to review that gray list or ghost list to see some of those lights that may be ours that we should be taking over?
Okay, I'll start with your first question regarding monitoring of vehicles. You asked how that was being brought into the audit. At this point, the audit's complete. It was done 3-4 years ago. So my role now is purely looking at those recommendations and seeing that they are complete. I believe I'm comfortable saying that the original audit was focused more on the big picture implementation of the project, and that our recommendations relate to that, and were not specific to the streetlight project. They were issues we had in the planning of the streetlight project that would be helpful to address HRM-wide for all major projects. So I can't speak to any of the streetlights on a gray list and where they would stand. That would be a question management would be best able to answer. I just blurred the two audit answers together, didn't I?
Yeah.
All at once. That was impressive.
But with the AVLs, I thought we were putting them, first of all, when we first discussed this a few years ago, we talked about our police and fire, the emergency vehicles having that, so 311 or 911 would know where the vehicles are located or where the case may be. How far further has that fleet tracking gone into our Parks and Rec crews, or perhaps our Halifax Water crews, or whoever else? How far broadly is these tracking devices or AVLs going to be on all vehicle fleets, or just particular ones?
That would be best directed to management. Our recommendation was more around the light fleet vehicles, so the cars and trucks, not the heavier vehicles. And as I said, we're waiting on standards which need to be approved for the usage of those so that the monitoring can begin. The committee can look at how well the usage of those vehicles is meeting the standards or achieving the targets or not achieving the targets. As for how many vehicles have the AVL technology on them and what's happening with that specifically, I think management would be best suited to answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hensby. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Andrew. One of my questions I have, it sounds like you have confidence that the two recommendations for fleet are going to be met. When somebody says pretty soon or soon, I always find that very subjective. So is it a month? Is it whatever? But to get to that point, though, normally when we see the recommendations come from an audit, we ask about an action plan and that the action plan is within a certain time frame. So looking at the delay between the recommendation and it coming to fruition in terms of being responded to, was there an action plan? And is it being followed? And do we know why the delay?
Unfortunately, in terms of whether there was an action plan, that's something that would have been presented presumably to Audit and Finance. Our office doesn't have anything to do with those action plans, so I can't speak to what existed at the time. As for how long it's going to take them, as I understand it, the standards and targets exist. They're waiting for final approval at senior levels of the administration. Assuming that is granted, which again, there could be changes requested, then it will be a matter of the monitoring committee having an opportunity to review the data, compare it to standards and targets, at which point we'll be able to say, yep, everything is done, monitoring is happening and has happened. How long that will take, I'm not going to hazard a guess. It's not my responsibility to do it, so management would have to give you a sense of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm seeing some heads nodding. Okay, thank you. John, would you mind stepping forward and addressing some of the questions that have come up?
Good morning, John McPherson, Executive Director of Property, Fleet and Environment. Mr. Chair, through you to the Councillor. So in regards to the timing, our targets and final approval of the rollout is happening now. We're waiting for that approval. Once that happens, we'll start our quarterly monitoring, and that will give the committee the information on how our fleet of vehicles are being used. And we'll be able to compare against targets. So whether that's 1 or 2 cycles to be able to show evidence that we're following the process, that'll be, I think, between management and the Auditor General's office to see when that checks the box.
And there was also a question about an action plan. I'm wondering if an action plan has been put together. I can't remember, forgive me. If an action plan has been put together for this and is it being followed? Thank you.
Good question. I'd have to go back and check to see what we have there for an action plan. I don't have that at my fingertips.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any further speakers on the list. Thank you, John. Thank you very much, Andrew. Having an Auditor General is one of the huge benefits and signs of maturity of HRM as an organization. And I'm thrilled that we have one. There is no motion for that. So the next item on the agenda is 13.2.1, the investment activities for the quarter ended March 31st, 2024. There is no presentation associated with this. However, Vicky is here to answer any questions. Go ahead, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of the Investment Advisory Committee, Investment Policy Advisory Committee, I'm happy to put on the floor that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee forward the staff report dated June 10, 2024 to Halifax Regional Council as an information item.
Thank you, Councillor Hensby, for seconding that.
Pretty straightforward as these come forward. Always happy to see when we, beat our budget by several $1 million. But I mean, it's very conservatively invested, and that has a lot to do with the rising interest rates previously, rather than, any smooth acumen on our investment folks. But anyway, happy to see that we're doing okay.
Super. Thank you very much, Councillor Cleary. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman. With the recent Bank of Canada's adjustment downward on the interest rate by 0.25%, and maybe futures, do you anticipate our investments not to be doing so well in the future? Like, how many of them are locked in fixed interest rate versus variable rates?
Vicki Robertson, Acting Director of Revenue and Deputy Treasurer. Excellent question. We did go out of our way this year to try to lock in as much yield as we could when we invested back in early May. So we have a number of GICs, we have a number of Treasury bills. So understanding that the rate was going to go down, we tried to lock in as much as possible. There is still, some risk to the bank accounts that are floating. We have to have some that are readily available, but we did plan for that, knowing that throughout the year that was going to happen. We time our operating expenses in such a way that we time our divesting to match operating expenses in such a way that we try to take advantage of the highest rates.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no further speakers on the list. Are we ready for the question? Question's been called. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 13.2.2, microphone technology and hearing hotspot upgrades. First of all, thank you very much, Vicki, for that information. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the tender transfer of $54,500, including net HST from capital project C1000021, public Wi-Fi, to capital project C12000001, IT service management.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Lovelace. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is, there isn't a presentation, but David is sitting up there. So as a person who does have little toys to augment my hearing, I absolutely think that this is needed, and so it allows for inclusivity for all persons to be able to participate well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I don't see any further speakers on the list. Are we ready for the question? Okay, the question's been called. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, thank you. And thank you, David and Corinne, for being here this morning. Moving forward on the agenda, we have nothing from the Grants Committee, nothing from the members of the Standing Committee, no motions, nothing in camera. There are no added items. Notices of motion. I don't see any. The date of the next meeting is July 17th, 2024. And can I have a motion to adjourn, please, from Deputy Mayor? It is 10:27. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.